I was flat on my back in a hospital bed, a drip taped to my arm, when my phone buzzed on the little tray table beside me. I reached over, expecting a get well message. It was an email from work. The subject line said, "Termination of employment. Following your continued unauthorised absence, we are terminating your employment with immediate effect." Unauthorised absence. I was in a hospital, attached to a machine. On a day I had personally told them, in writing, that I would be off because I'd been taken in by ambulance. I actually laughed, which made the drip pull, which hurt. Here's what had happened. 3 days earlier, I'd collapsed at home and been taken into hospital. From the back of the ambulance, before they took my phone, I'd texted my manager. "Being taken to hospital will keep you updated, so sorry." He'd read it. I could see the little read receipt. And now, 3 days later, the company had decided that the cheapest way to deal with an employee who was suddenly a medical complication was to fire me for not showing up. They were betting I'd be too ill, too frightened, and too overwhelmed to do anything about it. A sick woman in a hospital bed doesn't fight back. That was the maths, but I still had my phone. And on my phone was the text I'd sent from the ambulance, read receipt and all. And on the tray table next to me was a stack of hospital paperwork with the dates printed right on it. They'd fired me for being absent, and I could prove to the day exactly where I'd been and that I'd told them. They'd handed me the whole case. Here's what my employer was gambling on. They were gambling that I didn't know how catastrophically illegal it is to sack someone for a genuine, reported medical absence, that I'd read termination for unauthorised absence, feel ashamed and panicked, and slink away. But sacking someone for being off sick, when they've reported it, isn't a grey area. It's one of the clearest wrongs an employer can commit. And when the absence is a medical one you've documented, you're not just looking at an unfair dismissal, you're potentially looking at discrimination on top of it. And the whole thing lives or dies on evidence, which I had, all of it. So, from my hospital bed, I got organised. I didn't reply to the termination email in anger. I took screenshots of everything first. The text I'd sent from the ambulance, with the timestamp and the read receipt showing my manager had seen it. The termination email itself. My hospital admission paperwork with the dates. Then, once I was discharged and steadier, I took all of it to an employment solicitor. She read through it. The ambulance text, the read receipt, the hospital dates, the termination email calling it unauthorised. And she looked up at me. "They put this in writing," she said. "They put all of it in writing." She almost smiled, because employers usually aren't this helpful. They usually dress it up, invent a performance issue, build a paper trail of their own. Mine had just baldly fired a hospitalised woman for an absence she'd reported and dated. We sent one letter. The letter went to the company setting out the facts, the evidence, and the law. The reported absence, the read receipt, the hospital records, and the fact that dismissing someone in these circumstances was both unfair and potentially discriminatory. It gave them the chance to respond before it went further. The response did not come from the manager who'd read my ambulance text and fired me anyway. It came from a lawyer, and a lawyer looking at the evidence knew exactly what they were holding, which was nothing good. There was no real defence. You cannot argue that an absence was unauthorised when you have a read receipt showing the employee told you, from an ambulance, that they were going to hospital. There's no clever framing that survives a hospital admission form. They settled. The settlement reflected the loss of my job, the way it had been done, and the fact that they'd fired a hospitalised woman by email to save themselves a bit of process. It was a lot more than the redundancy-style payoff they'd been trying to dodge, and a lot more than they'd have paid if they'd simply behaved like human beings. I never went back to that company. I didn't want to, and the settlement meant I didn't need to rush. I found a better job, with a manager who, when I was ill early on, sent flowers instead of a P45. Here's what I want you to take from this. When you're at your lowest, ill, frightened, in a hospital bed, that is exactly when some employers will try to get rid of you cheaply, because they think you're too weak to fight. Don't delete anything. Screenshot everything. That text from the ambulance is worth more than any argument. Has an employer ever kicked you when you were down, assuming you wouldn't get back up? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more complete stories with no part 2s that never come, follow the page. New story every day.